Ooh, it is on this day, July 6th, 2023, that I have finished Midnight Riot, which is the first book of the Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. I actually never really learned how to say his name. Um, this book has kind of been on my list for a while. I've been looking at Rivers of London ever since I've read the Dresden Files, and I've off and on been trying to decide if I'll start it because it's an ongoing series. I don't like starting ongoing series, but I figured that unlike Dresden, the series might be a bit less of a complete hook. So, upon scrolling through a lot of books this last week, I scrolled through 50 books this last week, trying to figure out what I can listen to on my commute to work. I found that Midnight Riot was available, and I decided to go for it. We will talk later about what other books I also got. But today I finished it while I was at work, which is interesting. And so we're just going to dive right in, go to non-spoilers. I have some notes here, and we'll just go through all of them on my thoughts on the book in general, and then in spoilers, I have a few bullet points to talk about specifically. So with all of that said, let's jump right in. My very first bullet point, because it's one of the things I love the most about the book, or at least one of the people I love the most in the book, was Thomas Nightingale. I love him as a character. I love all the mystery around him, but I also love just his attitude and how Peter acts to Nightingale. That's part of what makes the interactions even more interesting. Is Peter's relationship with Nightingale. So Peter's the main character. Nightingale is a character you come across along the way, and I do very much like him as a character, and he brought a lot of entertainment for me. Now, going the next one, Peter himself, the main character, I love his voice and his thought process throughout the book. I wouldn't say that's always true for me, but he definitely has a very distinct way of thought, and the author was very good at making that very clear. And so it really brought him to life as a character pretty much from the start. You can really start to get his thought process going. I do have one caveat for that, but we're going to do that at the end of non-spoilers. But pretty much, I really liked his voice overall, and it kind of drew me into reading more chapters for sure. Initially, I was totally tricked with the different plot lines. I thought that they were unrelated. I was wondering what was going on, but the author drew them together in a way that was oh, interesting. I did not see that coming. So definitely for the first half of the book, those plot lines, I was tricked just a little bit indeed. So well done. There are a lot of mysterious and unknown elements. The new character, the main character, is kind of new to this kind of world, so we get him learning, but we also get a lot of the mystery and unknown, even with the people who are learned. And so I love a lot of the intrigue that comes with all those thoughts, and it really gets your own brain going as a reader when you start thinking maybe this is possible, and you're creating your own theories along with the main character who's creating his theories as he goes along. So I do enjoy some mystery, or just some unknown stuff. I like being baited with unknown facts. It makes you wonder, but you don't get the satisfaction of being told. I like that feeling. Next up, Peter's experiments are relatable, so I'm not going to dive into what his experiments are, but it's really relatable when he does them, because that's what most of the readers would probably want to do to understand what's going on. We would start to experiment and start to try to find the facts for ourselves. So that's another point in making him very relatable as a character, and also very entertaining. It's kind of, aside from the plot, it can be related to the plot as well. It has a balance of it feels like it's aside, but it can be related, and it's interesting either way. We're going right through this list. This might be my first actually short video. Really, overall for the book, I liked the first 2/3 a lot. I loved it. I loved the first 2/3 of the book. A certain sequence happened, which I am still struggling with. I'm sure for other people it's perfectly fine, but when I went into that sequence, I couldn't help but feel it was kind of absurd, and I couldn't really find myself believing the situation. And because I have aphantasia, this author does very much like to describe the visual scene, which I can't see. So I was also a little bit lost when he kept describing like the location that Peter was and the location that all these other things were. So in part that's my inability to do that, but that sequence I very much struggled. And then there were some things that I liked towards the end, like some little like nuggets. But the actual last chapter itself, I'm a little sad. I mean, not like actually sad, but I was expecting more of the last chapter. But the last chapter didn't really catch me. It didn't make me want to like read the next book or anything like that. And sometimes I like when it doesn't do read the next book, but it also just felt flat even for this book that I read. So towards the end, there's just a few more things I wish were there. It doesn't make it a bad book at all, but I was like, just a little bit more. Just give me a little bit more at the end. It would be great. So I wonder if that's something that he gains in the next few books. Usually authors get better as they write, or hopefully they should be getting better as they write. So I have hopes on behalf of the author. But yeah, I was a little disappointed about that. And there's one other thing I dislike, which he's not the only author to do this, and this is a personal pet peeve, so keep all that in mind. But I am starting to get really, really tired with the male main character fantasy characters always have to like think about sex every like 2 chapters. It's a bit much. It's not really necessary. I have had some very long conversations online with other book readers before about it, and even if it's accurate to a person and even if it gives them like personality or makes him relatable to other like cis-man readers, it still feels very unnecessary in the book and typically doesn't lead anywhere. So I'm just getting exhausted by it because so many authors do it. And this is another book where there were definitely 2 scenes where I just flat out started skipping ahead because I just didn't want to hear it. So that's my pet peeve and belief, and the more I read fantasy, the more I'm believing that. And I love when I read fantastic books that don't have that at all. It's extra satisfying to me because it proves that you don't need to have relationship plots for a book to be good. And that's something I believe. I'm not saying that no book should have relationships, because they're good in some contexts, but there's definitely a balance of like having a relationship that's actually important and just having the character have to express his interest in what he's looking at constantly. That's my belief. All right, we're gonna cut the rant there because it is a ranty subject. I know people disagree, but the more I read, the more I'm starting to really grip onto that belief. With all of that said, I think I gave a good overview of what I think of the book. I would give it like 4 stars, around 4 stars, like 3.8. So with all that said, we'll jump into spoilers. This is your time to leave. I left my water bottle over there because I'm a fool. Oh, actually, it's right behind me. Hold on, we might actually grab this water bottle. And with that, we'll go into spoilers. So, I love the river element. Was not what I was expecting. When we first ran to the river, and Nightingale was talking about there being something of the river, and he commanded the river to like bring up the water and put out the flame of the boat, I was like, oh, it's a genius loci, it's a genius loci. It was not. It was river spirits. And the river spirits are very interesting because they have this like whole family tree, and they have this different importance, and they kind of don't their story to power is very weird, and that was very interesting to me. It's not what I would have expected. It's like they got genuine power, but it was like given to them kind of thing. So all of that was very interesting to me. I liked all the scenes where we met the new spirits and we saw them interact with each other. There were a lot of like little clues and hints and things that you could see that Peter couldn't see, like to see that they were like supernatural or possibly about to like trick him into something. The main character is very gullible, so he falls for a lot of those things. And so it is kind of entertaining to pick it out and then see him fall for it right after. But overall, there were a lot of different interesting facts, and I liked some of the interactions that came from it. Something I forgot to say in non-spoilers, and I realize it now, but it kind of works here. I think the author was very good about, one, talking about diversity inside the context of the novel, and two, talking about London in a way that's like ironic towards his city. You know, it's kind of like it's like a theme of all the ways you love London and hate London simultaneously, right? You hate where you live, but you still live there anyway. We definitely get that vibe from the main character. But yeah, a lot of the river spirits all had like different like Nigerian backgrounds or other backgrounds, and I think the author was good at explaining that in a way that like wasn't like pointed it out, but also like giving context. And then also the audiobook reader, I'm doing audiobooks because I'm commuting to work every day. The audiobook reader actually had a fantastic Nigerian accent, according to the all the accent accent expert videos I've seen. It was kind of shocking to me. So that I just wanted to give kudos there, because it's not, I've never read anything in fantasy that actually like bothered to try including diversity really in terms of like skin tones. So at least not like outright in the page. So I'm gonna acknowledge that. All right, next. The initial deaths in the book were very intriguing to me. I didn't think they were related, as I mentioned in the non-spoilers. So as they were coming along, I was like, man, that's a very intense death, and that's very weird, and the weirdness attracted me to keep reading. And then there's the scene with like the baby thrown out of the window and all that, and that's also very intense in its own way. So that was very entertaining. And then later on, Peter was getting dragged into his own summoning circle, which was terrifying and very satisfying. I loved that sequence. It was fantastic. And then moving even further, I'm skipping a bunch here, by the way. I love the boat on fire scene, as I mentioned earlier. But later on, when Nightingale gets shot, that's like a very intense scene also. And then, even though I'm not a big fan of the opera sequence, that's the sequence I don't like, that moment where he is trying to take all the exits of the opera and he finally gets out and he sees that there's a massive riot and buildings on fire, that is definitely a moment. I do like that moment. I like most of the riot sequence and like all the buildings catching on fire and stuff like that. I just think how the riot sequence ended and then how he reacted to it afterward are weird to me. He kind of just brushed it aside. It didn't really matter. Like the whole, like he just let the guy who caused all that just go and said, I will find him again. And then he took the day off the next day. And then the day after that, he was like, oh, maybe I should hunt him down. And I just, when I think about the book, I worry so much about the fact that maybe Mr. Punch could have moved on. Maybe he could have done so many bad things without Peter knowing. Like, the fact that he let him go with the riot sequence and just let everything happen is a little weird to me. I wonder if I missed a detail, or I wonder if I'm overthinking it, but he probably could have just kept the riot going, or kept murdering people, or kept doing all kinds of things, and that's weird to me. And I also think that the police probably would have noticed Leslie and the big guy's name, I don't remember his name, the two of them participating in the riot. I don't know, there were some weird elements there. But some of the action sequences were still very interesting. And we can tell that, like, Peter's not, like, a big, violent person. I think that's something very different from Harry Dresden from Dresden Files, is that Dresden is, like, a fighter. And I'm not saying Peter's not a fighter, because he's dealt with it before, but he's definitely more in for the investigation. I can't see him doing the fireball spell for a while now. Alright, next. Already said that. Already said that. I kind of just said that as well. I liked all the thoughts and like theories I had before I found out that all of them were Mr. Punch. And even when I found out that like Mr. Punch was Leslie, that was a great twist for me. I loved that twist. Didn't expect it, didn't see it coming. But when I met Mr. Punch the character, like I heard him talk for the first time, I just hated him. And I wonder if that's also part of why I hate the opera sequence, is because Mr. Punch as an antagonist is the kind of antagonist that makes me kind of upset. Because he's gloating nonstop, he doesn't have any purpose, and he can't decide on one thing. And you can definitely feel that. And I think that's part of the author's intent, because Mr. Punch is like an amalgamation of memories, is part of the plot. And so he's probably acting spontaneously, but even with like the spontaneous acting, it was just so weird to me, the choices he made as an antagonist. You can see the things he wanted to do, but then he didn't do it. And he probably had a lot more options for killing Peter if he wanted to kill Peter or escape or do all kinds of things. So, again, a little lost there, but everything before then, up to when it was revealed that he was Leslie, and the fact that he was also the ghost from the beginning of the book, love that. I was thinking of a very different ending when I was seeing those initial murders. Like, even when I started to see the murders get tied together as some mind control, I was seeing a very different story than what was happening to Mr. Punch. So that also could be why I have a dissatisfaction with the end. I was expecting something different. Do I have anything else? Is that really it? It's very interesting that the author pretty much set Nightingale aside at the end, and how screwed Peter would be without Nightingale. It was hard for me to grasp what it's like to have like your boss gone and then like no one to like actually protect you. The interrogation was good. The interrogation sequence where they're like doing the double interrogation. But you can definitely tell that the general police force was after Peter. And later on, he's not a sergeant, but I'm going to say sergeant. Some sergeant from the police force was like berating him, kind of just being flat out rude and racist to the main character. And it was just like, wow, this is a weird time to be doing this, and okay. And then I don't think that came up again in the book, even after they knocked him out and all that. So I hope he doesn't remember that happened. It could come up in the next book as well, or I missed it, but I don't think I read that coming up. So, shrug. There's a lot of random tidbits like that I could bring up, but I'm not going to go too deep into it. Overall, I did like the book despite everything I just said. I most certainly do. And I am intrigued to continue Rivers of London, so we may do that. I will say, though, which this goes in the next section, the holds right now are very, very, very long in my library. It's kind of insane. I think there's more readers now than usual, and that's why all the books have very long waits. I saw several books that have waits that were half a year or longer, which is terrible. So, with that said, we'll go into what's new and what's next. So, let's start with what's new. I went ahead and I bought Venus by Ben Bova for $2. at a local used bookstore. I don't have used bookstores back home, so I'm going to use used bookstores while I'm here. So, very nice, $2. It's a sheeny cover. And I may read it one day. I just kind of just grabbed it on a whim. I was looking for Asimov books, but all the Asimov books and the Orson Scott Card books they had were all in the middle of the series, and I found this one, and I know that Ben Bova's from the same time frame as Asimov, so I went ahead and grabbed him. And then I also got, this one very much intrigues me, The Professional by Robert B. Parker. Sorry, the cat wanted to join in. The Professional by Robert B. Parker. This is a part of the mystery series called the Spencer series, or the Spencer novels. It's kind of like Agatha Christie in a way, where you can kind of just hop in to one of the many books of either Poirot or Spencer and just figure out what his investigation was like. These are older novels. I believe this is like number, like, what? 70 something? There's a lot of these books. There's a lot. I own number 4 right now, but only number 4. And now I own this one as well. It won't tell me what number this is. When this book came out, there's at least, what the hell is the cat doing? There's at least 30 other Spencer novels in here, so there is a lot. Very exciting. This is also a very short book. It looks big, but look at this font. It is very scattered and pretty big. It is a very small font, so I think I could honestly probably finish this in a few hours if I had to guess. It is a very small book, so I may do that at some point. What I really wanted to do was read a bunch of these little tiny small books in between books, because there isn't any pressure to read them in order, and there isn't a pressure to like have to finish them, and they're very small. So that was my hope, but I would also have to read the ebooks, and I'm trying to not stack too many of the same kind of book. Audiobooks are convenient because I'm commuting every day, but I still want to read physical books, so there's a balance there. So those are the only 2 new books I own that I have on hand to show you, but I have 2 new books at home that we'll unbox when I get back in a month and a bit. I'll be back and we can unbox some very, very pretty books. I've seen some photos of them and I'm very excited to show them. In the meantime, in terms of physical books, I am reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I'm getting closer to halfway. The progress is really, really slow with this book. I don't know how to convey how slow it is. It's slow. It's slow. I like the characters, don't get me wrong, I really do. But the whole mystery plot is so slow to me. So yeah, there's just a lot of details, and the problem with having so many details is I'm forgetting all of them immediately. I don't remember half the details in this book, and I can barely remember some of the characters towards the beginning of the book, because there were some characters that had a perspective for a few chapters and then they just went away entirely. So I'm having memory issues too while I'm reading this, and it's not great. I thought about putting it down entirely, but I figured I would try reading other books while I'm reading this and see if that helps me at all. But there's definitely some struggle. I'm hoping to hit halfway at the very least, because I feel I owe it that much to reach halfway. But you can see where we're at. This is the majority. This is the side I read from. So we're kind of getting there, but there are a lot of chapters left. I'm hoping it picks up more. It's weird because there's been twice where it like actually picks up and I'm excited, and then it slows down again shortly after. So not ideal. But I am currently reading this. If I need another physical book, I haven't yet, but if I do, I'll start A Master of Jin. I was going to start this actually last week, but I went through and I searched through all those 50-something audiobook forms, and I made a list of 5 I wanted to take holds of. So we have Rivers of London that I took a hold of and read. And then we have Spear by Nicola Griffith. This is a book I bought in hardcover. It's actually a very small book. It's 6 hours long. So I could literally listen to half of this tonight if I wanted to. I think I'm going to start it tomorrow just to give Midnight Riot a little bit space before I start a new book. But I'm pretty sure I can finish this very fast. So I'll be back in a few days, I believe. And then another hold that came through yesterday, which I've been meaning to read for a while now, is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This is a very famous book. This is a very, very famous book. I've been meaning to read it for quite some time now, so I'm very glad I got it. This book is 11 hours long, so it's a bit longer than Midnight Riot, but Midnight Riot was not long for me. So I'm very excited to read this book. I think my plan is I'm going to speed read Spear so that I can finish this book before my hold is due. I'm sorry, phone. Any new Crocs? No, we're good. So I'm very excited to read Ender's Game. My mentor at my work actually really wanted me to read it too. So it really works out because I get to read it while he's still my mentor and tell him what I think. All right, and then we have The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz as well. Why won't it let me show the... There. The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. So I also own this book in paperback back home. I didn't bring it with me, but someone who is visiting the house here recommended me Anthony Horowitz again, and I looked at his other books, like the Magpie Murders, but it looked like the waits for those were too long for me to bother, so I just went ahead and got The Word is Murder. I actually got the hold today, but I delayed when I would get it to 2 weeks from now, because I don't want to run out of time reading both Sphere and Ender's Game and Word is Murder. So, yeah. And then my long-term hold that I went ahead and risked is called Sea of Tranquility by Emily, is it Saint or St? Emily St. John Mandel. This was in the best sci-fi books of the year in the Goodreads Awards. So, I went ahead and got it. It's only 6 hours, just like Spear. So I figured the wait is probably not as long as it claims. So that is my current thought process with that one. And then we have... Uh-oh, it's not on here. Why is it not on here? We have Station Eternity as well. I don't actually know if I'll like this book. I realize it's a risk. It sounds interesting to me, but the thing about the description is that it's meant to sound interesting. Like this description specifically, it is a combination of all these different elements that all sound cool, which begs the question of if it's executed in a way that's cool. So it's kind of a risk, but the wait wasn't long, so I also have that one on there as well. It's actually available right now. 16 hours. I may listen to that. It is a mystery book. It's the start of a series, and I don't believe the second book is out yet. So there's also that to keep in mind. So we have a lot of books going on, but I'll be back in a few days with Spear and hopefully Ender's Game next week, and I will force myself to read some Way of Kings in between. That's it. I hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.